Chapter 6. Rapture. When I awoke the next morning, it was like a new dawn. The sun beamed through the windows of my humble room in a way that seemed brighter and happier than any other morning in my haphazard life. I knew that chemicals, peptides, or whatever were filtering through me on a cellular level due to the flood of emotions connected to my meeting Sondra and the Willow Lake group. I didn't care to analyze that magical night and make it flat and one-dimensional. No matter what explanations a scientist could come up with, I knew that my life had turned a corner that led to new possibilities. I showered and went down for breakfast, with a newfound affection for the other inhabitants of the hotel. The bald, bespectacled man with his scanty comb-over no longer annoyed me with his relentless rantings about Jesus and the apocalypse. I smiled and wished him a great day before pouring a large mug of coffee. When I sat down and sipped as I stared out the window, I heard the prostitute making her way through the breakfast crowd. I could hear her million bracelets shimmering up her arms as she said her good mornings and made her way towards me, once again trying to change my mind. I was more polite this time and explained that I had a girlfriend. I did my best not to giggle like a schoolgirl. Girlfriend, indeed. It sounded so preposterous to me. I hadn't referred to anyone as my girlfriend since high school. It wasn't like I had a snobbish attitude toward prostitutes, though. My grandmother had always said, "At least they keep the scum off the streets." That statement had always aggravated me. First of all, being a man, it upset me to think that the only kind of men who went to a hooker were supposed to be scum. Sex is a natural urge, and if you can't get it, why not pay for it? It's better than rape, surely. On the other hand, I've always felt sorry for women who feel that the only way they can make money is to sell themselves. How awful it must be to have sex with someone you have no feelings or desire for, just to make rent or to pay for education. Likewise, from a man's point of view, how awful it must be to have sex with someone who's only doing it for the money. Someone who has no true desire for you and who is play-acting and pretending to enjoy it. Sex is sacred, but it's also earthy and animalistic. Divine versus profane, I suppose. At any rate, the truth of the matter is, we all barter ourselves to each other. So, in a way, we're all prostitutes, aren't we? I don't know. It could do your head in. The women I'd been with up to that point had circumstances similar to mine. I hoped that none of them were married. We'd hopped into bed with the knowledge that it was just a one-time deal, or more, depending on the woman and the situation. There were a few times when they'd turn nasty after they realized they couldn't tame me, like I was a cold bastard on the outside, hiding a needy man-child on the inside. I'd never been afraid of commitment, just commitment to the wrong woman. I'd never known who the right woman could have been. All I kept saying to myself was, the right woman for me. I never knew who or what that was, until Sondra. It was all solidifying wonderfully as I sat and sipped my coffee. Staring out the window that morning, feeling like a new phase had begun, I realized that Sondra was that woman, for sure. I did my best not to call her until after lunch, but found myself dialing her number as the clock hit 11:45. It was hilarious how nervous I was, with my hand shaking and my heart lodging in my throat. After 5 rings, she answered, out of breath and flustered. "Hello?" "Sondra?" My mouth had dried up into a dust bowl. "Gavin!" She took a deep breath and laughed. "How are you?" Good. Sorry, did I catch you at a bad time?" My voice cracked with my nerves, making me cringe. "No, I was in the conservatory, potting some herbs. I had to quickly wipe my hands before I answered." "Oh, okay. I can let you get back to it if you like." I swallowed audibly as I cringed again. No, it's fine. I'm glad to hear your voice. What are you up to?" My mind scrambled to think of something noteworthy. I didn't want her to think that I was just hanging around and waiting for the moment to be with her again. My mouth betrayed me. Nothing, really. I could have kicked myself, sounding like a lost puppy. "Well, why don't you come around? I'm not far from where you are, unless you want me to come and get you." "No, please, I don't want to intrude." I wanted to intrude so badly. "No intrusion, silly. Come over." "All right, then. Shall I bring some wine?" "Sure, if you'd like." If I was a lost puppy, my tail would have been wagging furiously. She gave me the address and directions, which was, of course, up Darling Road. It led to a forest that backed onto Sondra's property. I was to look for a statue of Pan in the middle of some willow trees. Marvelous. After buying 2 bottles of Pinot, I made my way to Darling Road and soaked in the sunshine as I went. Her house was only a 20-minute walk away, mostly flat, and I was happy to have declined the offer for her to pick me up. Not that I was worried about being emasculated. I'm a long-term hiker, and the walk was easy. Most of the houses were hidden behind various trees and bushes, so it was like a country road lined with lush foliage that buffeted about in the light breeze. I could smell jasmine, the occasional wood fire, and earthy scents that hinted at other worlds. I passed one property where the familiar scent of marijuana mixed in with a heavy dose of incense. I felt like my cells were buzzing in unison, mingling with growing lust for Sondra as I took each step towards her home. I almost missed the statue of Pan as I was focusing on the end of the road, where the trees, bushes, and other flora became thicker at the edge of the forest. There was a ranch-style fence along the front, with a gate across the gravel entrance. I couldn't see the house from the road, as the trees were thick along the edges of the winding driveway. I opened the gate and went through, feeling like I'd crossed a threshold into a magical world. I wasn't disappointed. As I followed the path, I saw more statues scattered here and there, peering out of bushes like silent sentries guarding their mistress. What was it with all the statues in Willow Lake? Everyone seemed to be obsessed with them. I saw what I later discovered were various deities, perfectly peaceful, surrounded by plants, trees, herbs, and flowers associated with their energies. Sondra had gone to a lot of trouble to ensure that her garden was properly corresponding to the elements, the quarters, and the gods and goddesses displayed there. When I came to the end of the driveway, I was transfixed by the wonderful cottage. It was well maintained and boasted a large garden out the front. I saw every plant that you'd expect to see in an English country garden. It was so idyllic that I expected it to evaporate like a mirage as soon as I approached. Then Sondra came out to greet me. What a vision. She was wearing a simple crimson dress that flowed like silk, right down to her lovely toes. Her hair was always flowing in the gentle breeze. My knees weakened with the sight of her, and I nearly dropped the wine. "So you found me." Her laughter was like the tinkle of bells. "Yes, now I know where you live." My stupid attempt at humor was well received. "Good, I'm not afraid." She came to the bottom of the steps and stood on tippy-toes to kiss my right cheek. I was glad to be wearing a light jacket, which properly cloaked my excitement. Then she looked into my eyes and smiled, making me melt even further. "You brought wine. How sweet." She took the bag from me and grabbed my hand to lead me into the house. I was speechless as it was difficult to think of what to say to such a fine woman. I felt like a teenager about to spend time alone with a real woman. As we walked through the front door, I could smell bread, herbs and spices, incense and other delicious things cooking. The entry hall opened up into a cozy lounge room filled with an eclectic mix of antique furniture, surreal paintings, Wiccan bric-a-brac, and modern appliances, such as a TV and stereo, which played pagan folk music softly in the background. She led me into the kitchen, which was what I'd expected. Drying herbs hung everywhere, lots of exposed timber and ceramic bowls and jars containing herbs, spices, and other foodstuffs. There were also many pots, pans, and utensils hanging from a rack over the counter. She placed the wine on the counter and turned to face me. I was only inches away, and fighting the desire to grab her in a flash of unbridled lust. "Do you think it's too early for a drink? Not that I'm an alcoholic. Could I offer you some coffee, tea, orange juice, water?" She seemed nervous, and I wanted very much to put her at ease, so I backed up slightly. "Whatever your heart desires, my lady." Oh, what a schmooze. She laughed and curtsied. "Well, my lord, you're the guest, so I'll leave it up to you." I opted for the juice and watched her take out the glasses and pour, loving every tiny movement she made. Her hair hung down to her waist in golden ringlets that made me think of her as a fairy princess. She passed me a glass and we sipped in silence for a moment. "I've made bread. I usually do every second morning. I make a lot of my own food, trying to eat as healthily as I can." "Are you nervous? Please don't be nervous on my account." I had to help her as it was obvious that she was very anxious, with her quivering fingers on the chilled glass. I'm sorry. I just haven't had a man in my house for a long time. I mean, a very long time. I can't help it. She laughed and watched me like a frightened kitten. I kept my distance to show that I was in control and not posing a threat, which belied my surging desire. Don't apologize. I understand. It's been 2.5 years since I was with a woman. This seemed to relax her somewhat. She put her glass on the counter and smoothed her stray hair from her face. Okay, well, maybe I should show you around? Why not? I love what I've seen so far. She hunched her shoulders like a child filled with glee over having her parents adoringly gloat about her artwork. Come on, I'll show you the conservatory first. She grabbed my hand and almost danced off with me lumbering behind her, both of us laughing like idiots. Through a door in the back of the kitchen were steps that led into a wonderful sunroom filled with all kinds of plants, some living and some hung upside down to dry. There was a large potting table against the far wall, under a window that looked out into the lush garden. There was a smaller table in the center of the room, with various pots, jars, bowls, and a huge mortar and pestle in the middle. There was a bookcase to the left, stuffed with a variety of fascinating books, all to do with the craft, gardening, and many notebooks, as well as containers with pens and utensils. The other walls had many shelving units and plant stands, with more statues, smaller than the ones in the garden. It smelled like the earth, chlorophyll, and incense, all mixed in with the cooking aromas leaking in from the kitchen. This is wonderful, Sondra. She smiled shyly. I think so. How lucky to be living a life the way you want it. Right. I have to keep pinching myself. If it wasn't for my uncle's generosity, who knows where I'd be. So, you inherited this house. I could have kicked myself for being so nosy, but she didn't seem to mind. Yes, I was his only next of kin. My parents died in a car crash when I was 17, and there were no other nieces or nephews. It was just him and me after that. I was living in the city and working as a photographer when he passed away. I was shocked when I discovered that he left the house to me. Not that there was anyone else who he could have left it to. He was quite eccentric, so I'd always assumed that he'd leave it to a lost dog's home or something. I'm sorry about your parents. I didn't know what else to say. I wanted to make sure that I didn't come across as some desperate fool who wanted a ready-made life for himself, but wasn't sure how to do that. It was still early on in the piece, and nothing had really happened between us yet. As much as I was almost a transient, I had a substantial amount of money saved. I lived simply and enjoyed simple pleasures, but I didn't have a place to call home. It's okay. It happened a long time ago, and I'm a different person now. I was a wreck when it happened, of course. After I moved here and settled in, I made a living as a photographer, but I discovered that I love writing and drawing. I've been lucky, I guess, getting the job at the bookstore and making a bit on the side with the photography. I've actually made a little money with my poetry, as well as my designs over the internet. As she talked, I realized that something deep was happening. That was the moment where I realized I was falling in love. Every blink of her eyes and every gesture nailed me. The circle completed itself without any forcing on my behalf. I wanted to kiss her until the end of time. I wanted to protect her, hold her, and lay the world at her feet. When she finished talking, I explained myself to her. After a deep breath, I decided to let her know about my checkered past. Biting the bullet, I started with this. I feel I should tell you this, only because I feel so strongly and think so highly of you. She nodded and waited patiently as I told her everything. I went to great pains to explain how that was a long time ago and how I'd changed over the years and wouldn't hurt a fly now. The panic and dread of her rejecting me after I divulged my past scuttled about like millions of tiny beetles under my skin. After a large gulp, I ended with this. So, I understand if you want this to stop before it even starts. I thought you should know. I watched her face intently, looking for any sign that she was having second thoughts. She floored me when she smiled and came around from the other side of the table, taking slow steps and reaching out her right hand to grab mine. I know that was hard for you, Gavin, and I appreciate it. We all have our skeletons. Your only problem was that you were caught. You paid your dues. It was a long time ago, and I'm pretty smart when it comes to sensing good and bad in people. I can only sense good in you. You don't have to apologize to me for the person you were 100 lifetimes ago." I felt the tears welling up. I never cry, and at that time I was sure that I wouldn't allow the tears to fall. They hung in my eyes, stubbornly clinging to the surface until I wiped them away. She grabbed my other hand and closed in on me, turning her face and resting her head against my chest. We stood there for at least 2 minutes, silent and at peace with each other. Nothing was more perfect than that beautiful moment. I already knew that she was the one. After we snapped out of it, she took me for a walk around her beautiful garden. There was a fenced-in vegetable garden, some fruit trees, and a majestic herb garden. At least, the main herb garden. It was huge and sectioned into a pentagram inside a circle, with all the plants facing the correct quarter. She explained the magical properties of all the plants, making it a wonderful education for me. She constantly intrigued me with the depth of her knowledge. We went inside when it started to rain. It was a lovely summer shower, making the garden glow with a golden halo. We stood and watched, holding hands and smiling at each other every so often. I loved, and still love, how we can have many moments of companionable silence without the need to fill up the airspace with words. Just being together was, and is, perfection itself. It was 2:30 when she announced that dinner would be around 5 o'clock. She invited me into her den to show me her work, which was spectacular. I wondered why she wasn't more successful, or even famous. "I like being obscure," she said quietly, with a wry smile on her luscious lips. She was leafing through one of her portfolios when I asked if I could kiss her. "I don't know. Can you?" she teased. "I hope so." My lust was showing itself. I leaned down and grabbed her face with my hands. She dropped the portfolio on the desk and reached up, slipping her hands under my arms and sliding them up my back to my shoulders. The kiss was just how I knew it would be: long, luxurious, passionate, and totally satisfying. We couldn't stop. It felt like we'd done it 1,000,000 times. When I felt her tongue darting and tentatively slithering, my zones lit up like a Christmas tree. She pulled back a little and asked quietly, "Can we go to my room?" I could only nod, as speech was the furthest thing from my mind. She took my hand and smiled like a vixen. "I am naughty, aren't I?" I nodded again, and smiled as she led me into her Gothic bedroom. There was a lot of black and crimson, but the rest was a blur as we fell onto the bed in a frantic flurry of lust. I didn't want to pressure her, but it didn't seem to be an issue, as she appeared to be more urgent than I was, and that's saying a lot. How strange to feel like it was the first time, to be totally entranced and bewildered, as though I was exploring new territory. Everything about her, inside and out, was a complete revelation. Her soft lips on my neck, her greedy hands and urgent breath, like gusts of a warm summer breeze, drove me to the brink. Every part of her body became new terrain for my eager mouth to explore. It was familiar and foreign at the same time. When I pushed myself inside her, she opened like a stubborn fruit, still ripening and dripping as she took me in. She wrapped her limbs around me and gripped me for all she was worth, both of us groaning and thrashing against each other as the tension developed. I was drifting into the most pleasant dream, with the ebb and flow building into an unearthly climax. The ripples seemed to take an eon to settle. I finally rolled over with my sweet lady on my chest. Nothing else mattered.